Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that coding challenge. I thought it was a pretty good one, so I'm going to discuss with the solution with you guys. I was going to make it harder, but I decided to go a little bit easy on you guys, make it nothing too crazy. I think it was decent in between. So let's get started. If you read the goal, you'll know that there's quite a bit of information that talked about getting input from the user. So right off the bat, let's just import the scanner. So we'll go import java.util.scanner. This is how you get the scanner code into your program. And now let's make a scanner in the main method. We're going to be using this scanner in both of our methods, actually. It's best to only create one scanner. You don't want to have all these different input streams running around all over the place. All these streams will combine and just create one like massive flood, and then your basement will be flooded and you'll have to get like the carpet cleaners out, and that's no fun. So really only create one scanner. So we'll just name it in, and we'll set in equal to new scanner, and in the method the parameter is system.in. So there we go, we got our scanner. Now let's kind of jump into these methods here. You'll see that the first method says we're going to prompt the user to enter how many values they want in their array of floats. Okay, let's work with that. We can work with that. So first, if you remember, when you're creating a method, you have to say if it's going to be like public or private. So we'll just go private because we don't need it to be anything crazy where we're accessing it from some obscure place. So we'll go private. And if you remember, it also has to be static because main is static, and we're going to directly access it from here. Like I said, don't worry about that too much. We'll be getting into it later. But what you do have to worry about is this next part. It says that this int should be returned by the method, because we are going to create a method that's going to prompt the user to enter how many values they want to be in their array. So it's going to return this int that we are prompting the user for. Now we need to name our method. We'll just name it prompt. I did not spell that right. Prompt. There we go. That looks better. And now what we're going to actually pass in is we're going to pass in our scanner. Now I plan on creating a video to explain why you have to do this, why you can't just directly call without, if you didn't have this parameter, if this was gone, you can't just reference this scanner variable, because this scanner variable is in the main method. It's not located in this prompt method. So I'm going to make a video. It's called scope. It's the scope of variables and such in classes, and when you can access them and when you cannot. But if we want to use this scanner instance of the scanner class, we have to pass it into this prompt function. So we're going to do that. Okay. So we have our scanner in here now, and let's prompt the user. So let's just go system.out.print, and we'll just go print, and we'll say how large will, that's not large, that's large, how large will your array be? Okay, looks good. Now actually what we are going to do is we're just going to return in.next int. So we're not going to bother storing this integer in a variable because we just have to return it right after anyways. So we're not going to even bother making this variable. We're just going to return the input stream next integer. So there we go. There's our prompt method. Nothing tricky, only 2 lines. Nothing crazy at all. Now, the second method needs to make an array of this size and prompt the user to enter all the values they want. And then it's going to calculate the average of all these values. And we have to figure out the parameters and return value on our own. Okay, so that's kind of a mouthful. That's quite a bit going on. Might be a little large of a method. We might have wanted to break it up into a couple different methods, maybe like 2 different methods, but we'll just create it in one because that's what I said in the challenge. So private static again, nothing's going to change there. And now since we need to figure out the parameters and return value on our own, there's a couple things we could do here. Hypothetically, since we have to print out the average, we could just say that this method will return nothing, and we can just directly print out the average, the mean of these floats. But I'm going to actually just return the mean of these floats myself. I'm just going to do that myself, and I'll print it out in the main method when I call this array this array making method that we're creating right now. So I'm just going to call this method make underscore array. Okay, sounds good. And now for this method, we're still getting input, so we still need to pass this scanner in as a parameter, and we also need to pass in the size of the array that we're going to be creating, since that's in a totally different method. We could call prompt directly from make array, but let's just pass it in as a parameter. It's freedom of choice. Okay, so we'll have int size also. Oh, that's not it. There we go. That's still not it. There it is. Okay. Looks good. So how should we start this? Well, we know we need a float array. So let's just start with that. We'll make float. That's how you start the array with the data type, the square brackets. Let's name our array. We'll name it just ARR for array. And we're going to set it equal to new float, like we have been. And now for the size, we're actually just going to type this integer value, size. And that is going to allocate the space we need for our array, and it's going to be perfect. Okay, sounds good. Now, we're also going to create a sum variable, kind of like we did it in that last tutorial. And just like last tutorial, we don't actually need to have a separate array from this sum. And I'm going to show you how you can do that after we type out the actual solution. I'm just trying to get you guys to use arrays with these for loops. And speaking of for loops, we're going to make one. So we need to iterate over every element. So to start the for loop, you type for, the parentheses, and then you have the variable that you're going to manipulate. And then you have to have the condition to stop the for loop. So we set I to equal to 0 because that's the first element of arrays, and we want it to be less than the size of the array. And we are going to increment I by 1 each time. Looking good. Okay, so what we want to do first is we want to prompt the user. We're going to go system.out.printf, and we'll have it say enter float number %d. So what that's going to do is it's going to say enter float number 1, 2, 3, whatever, however large you want your array to be, and the user will know what number they're on and how close they are to finishing their input. And let's go colon space. And now for this %d, we're going to pass in I plus 1, just like we did in the other tutorial, where we are passing in the index we're on and then plus 1 because array indexes are funny and start at 0. They're not funny at all, they're stupid. Yeah, that's what I said. Okay, now let's actually get the input. Array index of I is equal to the input stream's next available float value. Perfect. That line reads pretty much clear in English, nothing tricky there. And now, once we collect this float value, let's just add it to the sum right away, because we're already in this for loop, it's convenient. So we're going to add array I. We're just going to add this float value right away. Okay, so that's looking good. So once this for loop finishes, we're going to have the sum of all of these floats that the user just entered. And I know we're supposed to get the average of all of these numbers, but if you remember from math class, the average is equal to the sum of all of the numbers divided by the number of numbers. That is very poorly worded. Let me try that again. So the mean is equal to the sum of all of the elements divided by the number of elements. That sounds a little bit better. So we're going to return sum divided by size. So this is looking good. We are returning the average right here with the sum divided by size, and we have finished both of our methods. So now let's just go back into the main method and work on calling them. So first, we have to get the size of the array. So we'll just set that equal to prompt with, we're going to pass in this in for input. So that is what we're passing in as a parameter because that's what it requires. So now we have this size variable. Oh, and by the way, you can name variables the same thing as long as they're not within the same method. So that's why I have a couple size and a couple ins. That's why that works, because they're not in the same method. Otherwise, if you had tried creating another size variable in main, that wouldn't work at all. But since they're in different methods, it's okay. So we have size. Now let's call the other method. We need to have this make array, and we're going to pass in the input stream again, and we're going to pass in the size. And this is going to return exactly what we need. It's going to return the average. So we'll set it equal to the average with our return value. Since it is returning a float, that's what we're going to set it equal to. And now let's just print this out. System.out.print. We'll just go printf. Format this. The average is %f, period. And now for, oops, we need a closing quote. And the argument is going to be the average. So we'll just type average. And there we go. No errors. Perfect. Let's run this. Okay. So if we look over here, how large will your array be? We'll go 10. 10 elements. Enter float number 1. I'm just going to type a whole bunch of different numbers. I'm not going to say them out loud, but I'll keep them reasonably sized. I'm not going to go like all like in the tens and then like 1,000 something. Okay. Looking good. Always have to type pi. It's like my thing. Okay. Looking nice. Looking real fine. Last number. And there we go. We get the average to be around 14, which makes sense. I was typing numbers from like 3 to, or like I guess like 1 to 50, but more towards the lower end. So that looks like it worked. We are awesome. We succeeded. I hope you succeeded. Let me show you a couple tricks real quick. I had you do this challenge, and to be honest, the code isn't as efficient as it could be. I could have made this code be a couple lines shorter, and I just want to make sure that you know that we can make this better. Yes, we can, I promise. So I'm going to keep the methods. I'm going to keep both methods, but we actually don't need to create this array at all. So I'm just going to can this array. So we no longer have this array, and so we can't have either of these two lines. But what we can do is we can just directly add the input to this sum. So we'll do, like I was talking earlier, like we could do. So sum is equal to in.nextFloat, and that's going to work nice. And now this method is looking good. And also in this main method, first, freaking again, I didn't close it. That is such a bad habit. I'm so embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to call myself Brendan from Modern to Me. That is a shame. Okay. Now what we can do is we can combine this all into one method. Let's can all of these variables. We don't need these. So we need this float value. So this float value is going to be from make array, and the parameters for make array are this input stream and the size, which we are going to get by prompting, and that parameter is in. And wow, that is a mess, but it works. So you can see that it's going to print out that the average is the float, and for the float value, we're going to get the value from the make array, which returns a float. So this is a float value essentially, and we are passing in the input stream, which we have, and then by calling this prompt, which returns an int, we're passing in the size parameter, and then in here for just the prompt itself, we are passing in the input stream, and that's kind of how all of that works, all of these nested methods. So that's pretty cool. This would work as well. I'm not going to do another average for you, but I hope you liked this challenge. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm going to see you in next tutorial, guys. Peace out.